put on a Power BI slide or two, just like this. And let me just share my PowerPoint, hopefully. And that was the wrong screen. See if I can. And I guess you can only see the slide now, but let's do it this way then.
So work.
You can see my slide.
We can.
And my PowerPoint, I guess. Yeah.
And your PowerPoint as well,
yeah. So welcome all, and especially to Mike, his second appearance here in Power BI User Group Denmark. I'm joined also today by Just, another Microsoft MVP here in Denmark, who's co-running our user group, and we are actually over 1,500 members now. So my goal is, of course, to beat the Finnish user group. I believe they're about 1,700. So we are getting closer. But next will be to beat the London Power BI user group. They are over 3,000 members, but let's see what we can do. And a big help is, of course, to have great presenters. And yeah, last time Mike was on the show, he got excellent feedback, and I'm sure he'll do a great job today as well. But during the session, please remember to mute yourself, and you should be able to use the chat during the session. And if you have questions, please put a Q in front of your question. And please also note that the meeting will be recorded. But first, I have some promotions of our next event in the group. It will be held in Danish and at the end of August. And I can't really reveal what's in it, but it will be fun. And I think you will have the chance of winning a big prize and a lot of honor in the Power BI community. That can be disclosed. And then just perhaps you can tell a little bit about the Power BI Next conference, which
sure.
is in September.
Yeah, in September in Copenhagen, and it's an in-person conference. I believe one of the first in-person Power BI conferences here in Europe, at least, where we have one full day of a lot of interesting sessions, including actually Mike coming all the way from the US, and also a lot of other great presenters. And the registration is open. You could go into powerbinextstep.com and sign up, and we have got a lot of registrations coming in the last couple of weeks. So we foresee that we will get the sold out maybe in the coming month. So if you want to be sure to attend the conference, then go in quickly and buy your ticket. And also go in and have a look at the schedule. It was just posted yesterday, the full schedule that you can see. We'll have 3 different tracks and 18 sessions in total. So
I'm super excited to be there. I've never been outside the United States. So this is, I mean, I've been in the US, I've gone to Mexico. That's about it. That's all I traveled to. So to go to Europe is the first time for me. So I'm really excited to attend. I'm excited to speak on it, and it'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward. There's a lot of great speakers. I'm humbled to be a part of the group of speakers here, because there's so many good people going to be at the conference, and experts I would consider in the Power BI space. So I'm thrilled. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. And as you can see, the title for the conference is Next Step. That is because we are targeting not beginners, but people that have already been working with Power BI for 1 or 2 years or more. So taking the next step in your Power BI career with signing up for this conference.
Yeah. So yeah, here's the page, and yeah, as you said, the schedule is also available, and you can see all the recognizable names from the Power BI community. So yeah, this will be fun. But there's a reason why we have the meeting today, and that is to learn more about the Charticulator. So take it away, Mike.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm going to do a heavy demo. I'll do a quick intro with video right now, and then I'm a big proponent of showing you how the things work. So my name's Mike Carlo. My background is mechanical engineering. That was my original career starting off. Did that for a number of years, and then moved into the analytics and BI space. And I became what I would call your quintessential Excel guru. I was the guy doing all kinds of crazy things in Excel, building macros, lots of tables, pivot tables, super fan. And so a lot of people in the office would come to me asking me to help them build more elaborate Excel analysis for various pieces. At the time I was running a call center, a lot of data comes through a call center. It's kind of unstructured data. And it was just hard to kind of put your hands around all the things that were data related. About that time, I was introduced to Power Query, which was my intro into all of the Power BI space and data modeling aspects. And that rocked my world. Frankly, that changed my career path when I looked at that. I thought, this is amazing. I can automate stuff. It makes everything very efficient for me to be able to leverage more of the Power BI space. So I started with Power Query, got heavily into it, and then moved my way into Power BI, the program, because I needed to learn more about all the things around data and data engineering, and I just loved it. I felt it was super awesome. While I was at this Fortune 100 company, I worked for Johnson Controls for 10 years. I also got my MBA and half a master's in data science. I basically doubled down on the data thing. I thought this is going to be the next wave of whatever it is, and I just enjoyed it. I didn't know it was going to be as big as it was, and it's proven to be very well. So I've moved off after leaving my Fortune 100 company. I did consulting for 2 years with a local company here in Milwaukee, and now I've started my own consulting firm. So now I do Power BI consulting all day, every day, and that's my career. So I've pulled all the cards down on the table and said I'm going to double down on Power BI. So if you are thinking about learning Power BI, if you're just dabbling in it, I would highly recommend learn more, get really involved, because the more you get involved and engaged with Power BI, that literally can be your new career if you enjoy it. So I would give everyone a good amount of encouragement to learn and jump into it. With that, I'll transition into visual building inside Power BI using Charticulator. So let's start off with just an introduction around what is Charticulator. It's been out for a while, but people don't really know about it and how it works. So let me present my screen here, and we'll start with that. So right here, this is a website. This is the Charticulator app. I'll put my screen up here so I can at least talk to myself. There we go. So this is the Charticulator web app. So this is a project from the Microsoft team. It's a research project. It's all open source. You can browse the source code right here on GitHub if you want to. It's a React style app, and it's chart design with little to no code. You can write, it's literally a couple of formulas you need to write here or there, but the whole program is really designed around no code visual building. This is actually based off of a white paper from the individuals who created the tool. So if I go to the About tab, Bongxi Li is, I think if I say that, Bongxin Li, I'll get the name wrong, was really the author of the paper and has really been the helm of this project. And so these individuals from Microsoft Research have really been putting together a lot of paperwork and documentation. So here's the various publications, and they got a best honorable mention for how to build an interactive chart layout program. And so if you want to read more in detail about what their mindset was, what their thought process was around how to build visuals from data, and this is really a very large divergent away from how we typically see Power BI visuals in Power BI desktop. Desktop feels a lot more like an Excel experience where I add fields and change properties. This is an entirely different experience. So if I go back over here to home, let's just walk through this a little bit. So this is a bit of the interface. You have this ability of being able to drag data elements from the left-hand side, and we'll get into that in a moment. And you can then adjust them, tweak them, add them to the page. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Tableau, this feels a lot more like a Tableau experience. I'm building a single visual. I'm bringing data together to build one visual representation, and then I can make multiples of these on a page. So it's super cool. There's a lot of different design styles. You can basically build anything you want. If you can dream it up, you can pretty much put it in here. There are some limitations that I have found. with the program. These linking items, so visuals with linking in them, is a little bit harder to build, but you do have a wide flexibility in there as well. And now the neat part too is whether you're using the desktop or the website, so charticulator.com, or you're going right to Power BI desktop, you can import these visuals directly into your Power BI reports, and they become interactive. So as you click the data, the Charticulator chart will update itself. It will change what it's doing. So anyways, great program. I'm a super fan of it. Here's another individual, Nick Snap. I've actually built this visual. This is a ribbon chart with a bunch of data from, I think it's like traffic incidences and drug-related instances from public data sources. So really, really interesting visual that he was able to build and create using Charticulator. There's actually, I have a YouTube video series all around Charticulator. So actually, I'll go snag, later on I'll snag the video URL from Power BI Tips. So we have a PowerBITips.com YouTube channel. So you go to YouTube/Power BI Tips. We have a whole video series. I think we've got almost like 30 videos or so in just Charticulator. And then I just recently did a series on Charticulator inside Power BI Desktop, about 10 episodes, short videos, trying to make them like around 20 minutes or less, just to kind of explain a simple aspect about that. And that's kind of what we're going to go over today. Not all the videos, but we're going to go over a portion of what is Charticulator, how to get it added, and then just build some quick, simple visuals in there so you can see how those visuals were built. So I'm going to just pause there, make sure there's no questions. We're good to go. So let's go back to desktop here. So I'm just going to start with a brand new Power BI page here. And so thinking about this Power BI desktop program, this is desktop for us. There's an icon over here, and let me just get my zoom it up so we can walk through that in detail. So over here, we have the Charticulator icon. So I'm going to show you how to add the icon or update it. So what you'll do is you'll click on the ellipsis, which is the Get More Visuals button. So in the visuals area, there's just 3 little dots. If we click on this, this will take us to another little menu here, and we're going to just say Get More Visuals. So we're going to go right to App Source. This is something that Microsoft has released, and they're continually updating this as well. When you click this, you'll have a search window, and you can just start typing in Charticulator. I don't love the name, but it is very unique. So there is only one of them. So once you go here, you'll click on the Add button on the right-hand side. Tony says he's still seeing the web page, so I'm not sure if anyone else can give me a visual confirmation, maybe Just or Eric. Are you seeing the live desktop screen?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure, just double checking. So it's telling me I've already added this visual. It already exists. Do you want to update it? Yes, I'll say update. And then it should update successfully. This visual was successfully imported to this report. So now, So now I'll be able to say OK here, and I'll be able to use this visual inside Power BI Desktop. Another note I will point out here too, if you right-click on this visual, you can actually pin a visual. I don't know how many people know this. This little dotted line section here in the little pane over here is custom visuals you've imported for this file. But if you would like to keep this visual for multiple reports or have it just a part of your repertoire in report building, you can just pin it to the visualizations pane and it will stay there for everyone, or it'll actually move up to this upper area. And with that, we can now start building our visuals. So here's how I like to take the approach. So I like to start with building a table first, just to understand what kind of data I'm working with, and it gives me some context. So again, when we're talking about Charticulator, it aggregates everything. So if you want a different grain or I think I unmuted myself. You need to be able to look at the data in. Oop, unmuting again. Someone keeps muting us. Okay, we'll try it again. Let me know if there's any audio issues, Eric, on your side. So what we're going to do here.
Yeah, I will tell you.
Okay, just checking. If it cuts out for me, let me know. All right. So what we do here is I'll typically start with a table. So I'm just going to start with just a blank table here, and let's just go with just some generic financial data. So this is a data set that I import from Power BI Desktop. This is when you go to a new page, there will be a brand new page in a brand new Power BI file. There will be a get data element here. So this is all I'm using is the general data set that comes with Power BI Desktop. So once we have this added, we can then do some sort of calculation. So I can start putting things on a chart and figuring out what is this chart going to do. Now Power BI Desktop automatically aggregates things. So if I put a product on here, we know that in our data set, we will likely have many different products, not just these, 6 products here. So if I add the gross sales to this, we can tell this is automatically doing a summarization. So this is an implied measure by clicking the little down arrow here and looking at the action of what it's doing. It's summarizing the information. So to me, this gives me the level of grain of data that we're talking about here by product. So the product dimension is the detail that we're talking about. So we'll start with this data, and then what I'll do is I'll explain the Charticulator app, and then I'll walk you through how to build a simple visual. We're just going to build a simple bar chart. All right, so we have the table here, and then what I'm going to do is click on the icon for Microsoft Charticulator. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to do this real quick. I like to have the table there, and I'll Control-C, Control-V the table as a trick. That way I have an exact representation of my data, and then I will change the visual type from a table. We'll change it from table, which is up here, and then we'll just click on the icon down here below and just click on the Charticulator icon. And what that'll do is it'll just automatically change it for you. And it'll try and put the data in the right places. So if I click the icon, we've automatically changed. And you'll note here when I did this, it kept the data fields, but it kind of broke them into 2 sections. In Charticulator, most of your data will go in the data section. So almost all of your fields will always go here. The links area, which requires very specific naming of the data columns to work. So if you think about Power BI Desktop only renders a single table for visuals. You get one table of data. When you're talking about linking data between things, the Charticulator app, as it works in the website, is you can actually have 2 data tables, one that defines your data and one that defines some level of relationship. I sold products from the United States to Spain. That would be like a relationship. So in the website, there's actually a whole concept around having a linked table. Power BI Desktop does not have that concept. So how they solved this was there's a very specific naming. I believe it's I'll have to go look at the actual definition of that. It's actually in one of my videos when I do the circle chart. But there's a very specific naming for the columns that you need to use in order for those links to be picked up within Power BI Desktop. Anyways, I'm going to move gross sales up here to the data column. So I'll have all of my data columns here at the very top. Okay. Now what you'll have is there is no visual yet. There's just a little bit of instructions here. So now what I can do, go over here to the right-hand side, and now I can click on the ellipsis. This is a trick. Not really a trick, but it's not as intuitive, right? You put the visual, you expect data to show up. It doesn't know how to represent that data for you. So instead, you have to click the ellipsis in the upper right-hand corner. So clicking on the ellipsis, click on Edit, and now we're starting to see what's going on in Charticulator. So now we're kind of into the program. There are some learning, and there are some templates you can get started with. There's actually some tutorials here, some links you can go use, but I'm going to just click Create Chart. So I'm going to create a chart from scratch, and then you'll have this new interface. Now, again, we're now inside a single visual, but we have a whole new editor inside this visual, and we're going to let's walk through just the overview of this. So what I do here typically is I always add the number of columns I need, and then when I'm done, I don't technically need the fields well or the visualizations pane. I can just hide them. So I get rid of those 2 panels, so I have just the main screen. Then also what I'll do is I want a little extra height as well. So over here on the far right-hand side, there is a little ribbon button icon that goes up here. So I'll also click that ribbon icon to even give me more space. All right, let's just talk about the UI. The fields that we grabbed from the data fields, the columns that we dragged in here, were automatically added in the fields well. So these are the fields, and this acts like Power BI Desktop, where I can drag these around and add them to various data points on the canvas or inside the glyph. Let's talk about what these things mean. So the report canvas is this square area here in the very middle. So let me zoom out just a touch. This is the report canvas. This is where the visual will go. You'll notice here there are dotted lines. So there's a little dotted line here at the top, and there's little dotted lines here. These are what they call guides. And the guides define where the edges of your visual will live. Everything has to link somehow back to some sort of guide on the page. You can't get away from it. You need to think about guides as being the page definition. Even though there's an edge here, there's a corner, you can't rely on that corner or edge of the report perimeter. You just can't rely on it. You really have to lean on just the guides that are going to define things for you, okay? You can adjust these guides by going over here down to this margins area. So each of these guides, you have a center line for the visual. You have a horizontal center line, and a vertical center line, and then you have margins. So there's one line for each margin on the page, and you can adjust them over here in the margins area. And that just brings the visual closer to the edge of the windows. So that's another observation there. Now let's talk about the report canvas. So by default, you have this layers area, and you can minimize these windows by clicking the little arrow next to them on the glyph. So if I minimize the window, you can see I have a little extra room here. So by default, when I start a brand new from scratch chart, I get a chart area and I get a plot segment. And then I have this thing called a glyph. So every data point you have in your data set is represented by a single glyph, unless you tell it to do some sort of aggregation. So earlier when we looked at our table, I think we had like 6 data points in there. The same is true now in here. I'll have 6 data points. So just very briefly, I'm going to grab the product column and add it to the x-axis. So I'm literally grabbing the name of the column and just dragging it down to where the x-axis is. And I'm waiting until it highlights orange until that means it's selected that element. When I click it and let go, each of my data points, so in my dimension table, the table that I showed previously, every single row that we observed in the table now becomes a data point on the page, and we can now see each one of them across the x-axis of the chart. All right, next is we have this on our data chart, but now how do we get visual portions on this? Let's say I wanted to represent this as a bar or something like that. So we're going to move away from the layers area, and we're going to move into the glyph. You can think of a glyph as some sort of artwork that links to a single data point. So again, for this visual here, my dimension was products. And so for each of the product items, I now have a single glyph that can represent something on that item. So what I can do here is I can go up to this area called marks, and these are like how I'm adding visual representations or things on the page. I can click the visual representation of that. I can click and drag it directly into the glyphs area, and you'll see that now I have 6 data bars. So for each of the data points I have a bar that represents them. But there's no dimensional aspect to this. This bar has no dimensions around what it's doing. The height is basically the same. There's nothing defining the height of each of the bars. So next what I can do is I can then grab the dimension piece. This is the calculation or the measure that we're using, the calculated value for each of my dimensions. Grabbing gross sales, I can now add it to the height of the data bar. And what that does now is it now takes gross sales and represents that as a height of the bar. And what it will do is it'll automatically auto scale. So the one item in the list that has the highest value, which is Paseo, is now the largest bar, and then everything else scales according to that largest scaled item. And then there's a whole bunch of other features here, but I think this is enough to kind of at least get your framework around. There is our report. Let's call this a plot segment. This is the plot segment here. It's a 2-dimensional X and Y on a plot segment. And then we also have the glyph. So the glyph is like the visual representation of what's on the chart. Okay. So someone asks, what are the options in the chart in the marks menu? So in the options, it's very simple. You have a rectangle, an ellipse, which is technically a circle. So you have an X dimension of the circle, and you have a Y dimension. So you can make it skinny or narrow, or you can make it really wide. And then you have this triangle shape. Those are technically all you get from a marked standpoint. You also have these things called shapes or symbols. They're slightly different, and they have other properties. There's like a circle, triangle, square. I think there's a star in there. I think you can define other things about the symbols. And then you have the ability of adding a single line. So you can have line values or just a line represented across the page. You have a text area. So we have two different text options. You can add a single text, like it's literally like a one word kind of thing. I think you can wrap the text as well. You can also add a text box. So you can define a perimeter, kind of like a boxed area for where you can add text. So those are the key things you're going to find in all the marks. Let's go all the way over to the rest of the bar here. Let's just kind of walk our way through this menu bar so we can see what's going on here. We have these things called links and linking things. These are when you have multiple data points, and I'll try and do a demo on this later on, but this is where you have data points and you can actually draw data that goes between the different data points. So you can add a line or you can add a ribbon that will then span between two data points on a graph. Then we have this area called guides. So these guides, this is a single guide here. It's a single dotted line. And basically it defines a position. So actually, this is actually a really good place to demo this a little bit. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to, for sake of argument, we've kind of built a simple visual. I'm just going to delete this and we're going to kind of start over. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to erase my glyph. So we have nothing here. So I'm going to start basically from scratch. The guides we have in this drop-down menu is we have different horizontal, vertical, and you actually have a polar guide. So a guide that goes around in a circle or radii. What you can do here with these things is these are anchors that I use to help me define certain sizes or dimensions of visuals or charts on the page. So for example, if I want a guide in the Y direction, I'll click on the guide in the Y direction, and then I'll try to grab my cursor here and I put it close to an edge, and then I'll just drag a line. So what it does is these little green marks, so if you notice here, I'll go in really close here. Some really important notes around just in general how you use the program. You see there's guides here. This guide has 4 different other guides attached to it, and it's going to equally divide the distance between each of those guides for the length of this line. So it's a line, and then I have, kind of across the perpendicular to that line, I'm going to have guides that go along with this. It'll always be horizontal. It doesn't go any other direction. But what I can do though is the upper corner here is white, meaning it has no definition. So this is one thing that's very key as you work with Charticulator is when you make visual elements on a page or when you make visual elements in a glyph, if it's green, it means it has definition. It's locked into a certain position that the program can understand. Right now, if I resize this page by grabbing the corner here, that mark will not move. It does not adjust. It does not change. It doesn't. There's no way for it to adjust its size based on the dynamic properties of the visual here. So if I move the visual, it doesn't adjust. However, if I go click on this guide again, and now I move the corners up to something that's defined, if you'll notice here, when I move my cursor closer, you can see that there are areas here where it's now turning orange. The colors indicate that it's trying to snap that corner, that little circle, it's trying to snap that to the intersection of those 2 data points. And by doing that, I will define a physical position of this. And this is why I said the margins or the lines on the edge of the page are so important, because this really defines how everything is going to stretch and size together as part of your visual. So I'm going to click that point and drag it to the corner there, and you'll notice that it's green now. Now, I do know, this is another thing here that's interesting. I highlighted the line accidentally. There we go. There we go. You'll notice here, this data point is green. However, it's not defined in a horizontal way. So that means the point is green, meaning it's defined on that left margin on the page. However, it doesn't really define the height. The height is technically not defined. So if I stretch this page here, it's trying to represent it as a ratio of whatever that page would be, but that may not be what I want. So I typically, again, what I recommend for people to do is grab those data points and always lock them into a cross section where that intersects those 2 data points. So now as I adjust this graph, you'll notice that it sizes now automatically with whatever I'm doing. And if I need to draw other data elements on here, or if I need to put other chart pieces on here, I will now use these chart elements to build out more visuals. So let's add another guide here as well. So I'm going to add a vertical guide, and this time I'll go across the bottom of the page. So I go here to here. I'm just going to make sure that this is attached to that bottom corner like that. And now I have more gridding options. So if I wanted to build a visual that was smaller than the rest, or a quarter, I can use this gridded area here. So now that I have a nice grid up here, all those data points can be used to build different visual pieces. Okay, so we've talked about guides. There are two types of plot segments. We have a two-dimensional plot segment and a one-dimensional plot segment. You can think of a one-dimensional plot segment as a line with single data points just on the line. So a single point on that line that adds some data points to it. So let's start with one of these. Let's go with the line one first. I don't use this one very much. This is not one that's very common, I feel like, when I build things. But if I want to, I can go in this middle graph here. And so what I've done is I've clicked on the left-hand side and then dragged the line until it hit the right-hand side. It just kind of ended it there. So it's defined by those two guide points for me. Now, it's interesting to note here, the line has a direction. So where you click first is where the 0 point will go. Where you click second was where the high number will go, so that it is directional. So if you want something to go from small to big in a vertical direction, you need to click at the bottom of your chart first, lock in that point, and then drag your cursor to the top, and then click the top of the point as well. Okay, so now that we've got that here, now we can go back and start adding other things again. So I can go back here again. I can add product to the axis. And so now I have data points. Now, again, the one-dimensional plot area literally has 1, 2, actually, I'm trying to draw here on the screen. Let's go that one. Oops, too far. It only has these data points. So there's only a data point on the line. So where the words are interacting with that line there is the single data point that I get. So when I add a glyph to this, the glyphs will just show up right on top of each of these data points. So I get 6 data points right here on those lines. And then the intersection, so when we look at the glyph will have a crosshair, basically a box, right? The center of the crosshair of the glyph will be on the exact point where each of those data points live. So let's go to the glyph now. If I zoom over here, oh, another really great tip here is trick. A lot of the times, the Charticulator app, there's a lot of little things you'll be working on the glyph, and then you go back to the report canvas, and you'll kind of jump back and forth. One of the things you can do is you can click this pin at the top, and you can unpin the glyph, and it can get big, which is super helpful when you're working on just designing just the glyph, not the chart type. So I've unpinned it by clicking the pin button, and then now I've popped this out. So now I can go over here, and I'm actually going to grab a symbol this time, and I'm just going to add a symbol here to the middle. So all this is a simple little tiny circle, and then because I've highlighted this over here in the layers area, so this is the layers of the different charting elements I've added, when I click on symbol, I have a whole bunch of attributes that go along with that symbol. I can change its type. So we can iterate our way through. You can do a cross, a diamond, a square, or a star. Let's just pick a star for now. And then you can change the size of it. So I have a little slider here for the size of that star. I can increase the size of it. And this is where a lot of the features for Power BI don't give you the ability that Charticulator does. So we start walking into this whole idea of like, well, what if I want color to be associated with things? What if I want other dimensions to be associated with certain things? Yes, you can do that to a degree within Power BI Desktop, but I can't change things like the stroke. So I can make a stroke color on top of my star. So not only can I have a shape, I can add a color around the shape. I can adjust the fill color to kind of anything I want. And there's some built-in colors, or there's some other color palettes you can use directly in here automatically. So you can just kind of pick things that you think look good. This is not a very well-designed star at this point, but now it looks very Christmas, so we'll go with it. But then here's other things too. You can actually define data points to the line width or the opacity, or is it even visible or not? You can have like conditional columns there. There's a whole bunch of other really rich features. Again, this is the idea of designing these graphics is a star shape has more properties than just its color and its stroke. You can have all these other rich properties. And the neat part about this is any data point you have can be bound to these other visual properties. And I think this is really the very large distinction here around why Charticulator is amazing for me, is because it can do so many more things with visual shapes for us. So we now have a star here, and I'm going to actually, instead of just having the star be a single color, I'm actually going to grab the product and I'll add the product to the colors. So now this will be an array of colors. And then what we should be able to do here on the right hand side is if I click on the symbol.fill, these are the colors that are picking up those various colors across our page. So each shape is now picking up one of those colors. So I'm going to click out of that. I'm actually going to pin this back to the panel. And now we will see that our stars have been represented on the center point. So the centroid of this star is the same center that's on the graph. So if I zoom in here real quick, you can see that each of these stars have a center point. It's on that data axis. So there's no height adjusting here. It's just taking the centroid of that shape there and adding it for you. So that's how a one-dimensional plot segment works. Let's build out another one here that is a bit more two-dimensional. So let's go over here to plot segments. Now before I start that, I've made a glyph. This single glyph works in multiple contexts. So if I make a new plot segment, it will automatically use this existing glyph. Let me show you what I mean by example. I'll click the down arrow here. If I click the 2D region and then grow a little chart here in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll notice that there's the exact same glyph that we had to define here. It's now being used in two different charts. And then what I can do here as well, but now this is a two-dimensional plot segment, I can grab gross sales and move that to my y-axis, which will then define the height or the distance by gross sales. And then if I grab my product and to put it on the x-axis, now I've got my dimension across horizontally. So now I'm able to define not only the centroid of the star, but I can define the shape of the star and everything else that I need as well. So I can go here to the star shape, and maybe we made it a bit too large. So let's just do 500. Let's go maybe down 200. So now I have stars that are represented in a single line, as well as stars that are represented up and down based on some data points. This is the side of things that get really crazy and very cool for me, I feel like, is we can do a bunch of other creative things along with this, right? So I've only added one visual element to this glyph, we can add n number of other things. So if I want to add other visual elements here to this glyph, we can then add a text box. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a text box. Actually, I'm just gonna grab and drag it over here, drop it in. And what it does, let me pop the glyph out again. So clicking the little pop out button, I'm gonna make my glyph larger, and then I'm gonna zoom in so we can see it. So I'm gonna zoom out just a bit, minus, minus, minus. So let's just say maybe I want the text over here to be on this side. And instead of just having it just an arbitrary text, I want to bind this text to some data points. So let's put the product name up here instead. And then maybe we want to add a second text box. So I'll click another text box and drag it in here as well. And you'll notice there's a little green data point. So this text box is linking itself based off that position. So when I grab that text box, there's a dotted line and the little green data point in the very center. I zoom in here again. This is where it's anchoring. Oops. This is where it's anchoring. The text box is anchoring itself to that green data point. Now what I can do is I can add gross sales to the text here as well. And you'll notice that we get this really crazy large number. Great, but we want to format it. And this is the part where you do a little bit of coding if you need to. If I go over here to the attributes area, I have this gross sales. I believe, I don't know exactly the syntax of this, but you should be able to add in here. The formatting of this is here on the far right-hand side. And I think you can just do, there's a syntax that goes along with this. It's d3.js syntax that allows you to do this. I think if I just do a comma.
And a 0, I think. Yeah.
Add a 0 in front of it. There should be a way of adding a comma there. I think I add 0, comma. Doesn't like that formatting. I don't remember all the formatting. If I want to get rid of the decimal place, I do know how to do that. So if I'll just get rid of the decimal. If I add the 1 and put a 0 there, that would change the end and it rounds the end for me. I don't know. Can I put a comma there? 1, 1. Yeah, it's not happy at me. So I'll just leave it .0f for formatting for float and no decimal places there. There's other syntax formats. I believe there's the F was what you would change in order to add the commas in there, but you can definitely do that and add the commas and format that as well. There is a syntax to that. That's off of the Charticulator website. So for references, there is a whole getting started guide, and you can then go in here. I'll just do format, text formatting. Down here, they start talking about how you can add additional formatting options in here. So you have formatting the access text labels. Here's a percentage. You can do 0% to do a percentage. I thought they had average mean where this indicates the floating. Ah, yes, here it was. It's the D3 syntax that you can use. So I'm just going to quickly run over here, see if they'll let me have. This is all the syntax that you're able to use, I believe.
Constantinos has helped us in the chat.
Ah, perfect. See, this is excellent. Everyone's pulling together as a team here. So if I go down to the end, it looks like a
colon and a comma.
Colon and a comma. Let's try that. Oops, colon and a comma. Didn't like
without the F, perhaps.
Ah, comma. Okay. So I leave the F and gave the comma, and now we've got commas in there. So that's formatting on the syntax there. So you got, and then I believe you can also, if you wanted to go add a decimal place, you can do the comma 0.1 F, I think. Yes, and there it goes. And so if I had this zoomed out a bit more, we can see we've got our decimal back. So now you can do custom formatting inside the visual, and this is neat for me. I think this is really interesting because this allows you to have really control, like we're really being able to format a specific thing on the visual itself, and we're not actually adding extra burden to Power BI Desktop because it's using the data that's given to it, and it's in visual rendering this stuff. So it's doing this formatting inside the context of the custom visual. So Power BI Desktop is not having to calculate a bunch of extra measures to make this happen. This is handling JavaScript inside the visual that's doing the formatting and stuff for us. So it potentially, while it does add a lot more overhead to the visual itself in general, there might be advantages to this where you can get some additional calculations or advanced calculating inside a single data point or data points that are inside the visual itself. So again, another way of being a bit more efficient there as well. So I'll get rid of the 1, hit enter again one more time, just put the comma. Actually, I don't want that. I want 0. There we go. So now we rounded it back down. All right, good enough. We'll stop playing with the formatting. If I pin this back in, you can now see that all our visuals have this now, the name, the label, and we have kind of a bit of redundant information on some of these charts. So what I can do now is actually I can start really stylizing the chart, and then now we can minimize the glyph. We can minimize the layers, and we can actually go into the chart segment here, and we can start really turning things off. And there's a lot of settings in here, just as much as there are in desktop. So we don't have to show the X and the Y axes. We can actually hide them. So we can turn it visible off. And then for the Y axis, it's a numerical column, and we don't want to show it either. Because now we have data points and we have stars, and we can just add labels to them if we want, or any kind of other information that we want about these things. So really rich capabilities here, what you can build with desktop. So we've talked about the 2-dimensional plot segment, the 1-dimensional plot segment, guides. Let's talk about scaffolds. So there are different types of scaffolds. In this chart here on the bottom, actually, you know what? Let me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually delete one of these. Let's just start with a bar chart because I think a bar chart makes more sense here from a scaffold standpoint. So let me delete this real quick, and I'm going to delete this other chart here too. Let's go back to our layers and our glyphs. I'm going to leave my guide coordinators. I'm going to erase my glyphs data. Okay, we're going to start from scratch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a 2-dimensional plot segment. So I'm just going to grab some arbitrary visual graph here. And then same thing we're going to do before. I'm going to add a mark onto the glyph here. So it's going to define my data bar, and then I'm going to add just gross sales to the height. So for now, this is good enough to get ourselves going. So this graph is basically stacking across the X direction. If you add a scaffold, you can add a vertical line scaffold to this chart. Hopefully, I do it right. It's basically the scaffold on the X direction means you're going to be building things off of the X axis up. If I pick the other scaffold and drag that over to this chart, you'll see that I have another scaffold now doing some other data points in the Y direction. So now I have two different scaffolds that I can draw out on top of my product. So now I have the X axis for data points here, and you can now see that it aligned to these data point products. If I had other dimensions, I essentially could add other dimensions to the Y-axis as well. And now it's defining the scaffold. There's another, let's call it a scaffold, as like a dimension table, right? So if I now bring the product over here again, you'll see now that this is kind of the intersection of these two data points. So that, this is why Amarilla and Amarilla have the intersection of the same data point. So if you have two dimensions that you need to represent together, the intersection of those two dimensions are now represented as the different scaffolds. Let me undo some of those. Control Z, Control Z. Let me undo the scaffold. You can also change the chart type in general. So I can say, I don't want to do that yet. Let's go back one more. Another Control Z to get this one. So I have a stacking on the X-axis. Kind of related to scaffolds is this ability to be able to stack in different directions. So I can stack in the Y direction, meaning all the bars are now going horizontally, and the dimension property would essentially live on the Y-axis at this point. Do that. And then what we can also do here on the chart type is there are other options in here like the packing or a grid. So it'll take each data point. So again, each glyph now becomes a squared stacked grid, and now each of the items or each of the data point elements are now part of that grid. So if so we can see what we're doing here, I'm going to add a little text box. I'm going to center the text box over top of the glyph by just dragging it. I don't think I did that very well. Let's try and center it again. Looks better. And then I'll add the product name to that text box, and now we can see these are the bar heights. Essentially, this is like a you could think of this as more like a shoot, the things escaping me. When you have multiple charts, Eric, help me out. When you have multiple charts on a page, I forget that inside a single visual.
Multiples, small multiples.
Small multiples. You can think of this kind of like a small multiples thing. I have a dimension for each of the heights of the glyphs, and then I have a kind of like a small multiples going in here on one single dimension. And then the last one here we can do is we can actually say, okay, we don't want the grid packing. We actually just want to take all the squares and just kind of shove them together. So if I hit packing, it tries to kind of cluster them together. Now, it doesn't really make as much sense here with a square, but if I had more data points and turn this into like a circle, it would actually make more sense. So if I do, let's see if I can delete the square here. See, now it's packing all those items together as closely as it can. If I now add a circle to the glyph here, now those are the packing for the circles. And there's actually, so what happened here was, I'm going to explain this real quick. There's a pecking order of layers. So this, I just put a glyph item here on the page, and this glyph mark is higher in layers than what is for the text. So the text is actually underneath of this, and I can know that by looking over here in the glyph area, where we have the text object on the top, underneath, and then the shape is on the top essentially. To me, this is counterintuitive. I would have read this as the text is on top of the shape, but it's actually the reversed opposite. The text is being rendered first, meaning it's on the very bottom of the page, and then the shape is being rendered next, which is on top of that. So it's actually kind of in reverse order. So to fix that, I'm going to grab the text box and move it below the shape, and now all of my words will appear. So now we can do, if we wanted to make this a circle, we can add our gross product sales to this mark. So I can change the width and the height. So now I have circle bubbles that are now all able to adjust in size, and it will try to pack them together in a group together for me. So that's what packing means. All right. I think this is enough of explaining the program. I think I've gone over pretty much everything. Oh, I think the only one I did not go over was the polar plot and this other one called custom curve. So let me just go back here. I'm going to undo a couple things, Control Z, until I get back to some charts that look like a bar chart again. There we go, back to our bar chart. So if you think about how we've been dimensionally looking at this, you can actually take a chart, and this is representative of like time is a really good way to do circles. So if you have multiple years or information there, you can see how that works as well. So if I go up here to the scaffolds, you can click the polar plot, and I'm going to bring that and just drag that onto the chart here. So what happens now? This is a bit more of a mind bender here. What's happening now is you basically have a donut chart where we start with one of the dimensions. So each value here is our dimension. And I like starting with a bar chart first, because it basically takes the bar chart and just kind of takes the x-axis and kind of wraps it around itself. And now you've got the x-axis wrapped around all the data points. So even though I have a square representation here, it's actually taking all the data points and wrapping them for me. So this is, again, one of the things you just cannot do in desktop is this kind of stuff. You can't do crazy cool, radial level looking things here in the glyphs. So you have this mark here at the very beginning here where I can actually take this and quarter out that graph so that it makes sense. So I can take this mark here. I'm going to just drag that around till it's like 180 degrees. I'm going to drag this down. And there, now I have like a little radial, like a sunrise kind of thing. So now you can do information around that. So now what we can do is we can grab our product, and let's actually go click on our shape. So I'm going to click on the shape. We're going to click our product and make that part of our color. So we have different colors for shapes. And then we may want to add a text box on top of them that kind of radiates away from the data point. So what we can do now is we'll zoom in on the glyph, unpin that, grow it out large. I'm going to zoom out here just a little bit so we can put some text boxes above it. I'm going to grab the text box, so click it and then drag onto the canvas. You'll see my little green data point is at the middle here. I actually don't want that. I'm going to move my reference point here to the end. I'm going to move my text box to the end of the bar. And then what we can also do here now is we can actually rotate it. So if I grab this little thing, it'll let me rotate the text, and I can rotate it 90 degrees. So now I'm able to make the text in a horizontal kind of coming out there. So now I'll add my label for product. Now my product label starts at the end of the bar and then kind of migrates its way out beyond the end of the glyph. So once we're done with that, let's even go a little bit fancier here. We can actually add in another text box. So I'm going to grab another text box, drop it here on the report. I'm going to try to add this here at the base of the visual. And now I'm going to add the text box and just kind of center it over top of there. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the gross sales to this text box. Now it's a very large number. It's super big. Again, with the formatting, you can then put commas or whatever else you want in there. So now that I've learned how to do that, I shall use the commas. And then in addition to that, let's see if we can truncate this a bit. 0, like so. And we can change the text size of this. So let's go really far down. I'm going to go down even further, 7. I know you can do thousands or hundreds of thousands, and then I'm going to change the color of this to white. Now this is not perfect, but I think you're going to get the gist here. Oh man, I just want it to be a bit smaller. I'm going to make it really small, almost unlegible. There we go. Flipping there, a little number. I'm going to pull it up just a little bit so it's around the bottom there. So now I have the value of the bar plus the name of the location there. And let's just say, oh, this would actually be good too. Let's change the color of the words to match the color of the bar so it's even more clear. So I'll add the product to the color area. And so now, even though this is very dark, I'm going to pop this in, and we will now see on our chart, and I'm going to make it bigger here so we can see what's really going on. Yeah, now I've made my text way too small. So let's try increase the size of that. Boop, boop, boop. Something like that. So now I've got this really highly customized chart. I've got a sunrise. I've got the names of all the different words on each of the elements. And now I have a number that's on the base of each of the chart types. So really interesting stuff here. Now that we've played with the visual, we've been able to make some stuff happen here. So I'm going to make it large here. And then, you know what I'm going to probably do? I don't think I can adjust it too far. Yeah, it's going to bring my height down. So what I'll do here, in addition to this, I'm just going to click on the chart area. I'm going to adjust my margins to be like 5 for each. 5 tab, 5 tab, 5 tab, 5 tab. Now we've got a visual with a radial chart, and maybe I want to add something at the bottom in a bar chart as well. So you can actually add multiple plot segments if you need to. So I'm going to actually quickly draw another plot segment here down below. And there's my bar chart for the same data. And now I've got two chart types kind of representing the same information. I'll click over here on the right-hand side around save. So that will save my plot segment here. And then I'll say back to report. And there we go. So we've been able to build many different types of custom visuals, and you can do all kinds of crazy stuff under here. And now you can stretch and grow this this visual, and it will automatically grow and shrink the size of this. And the cool part is this should be interactive. So if I click on multiple elements here on the report page, it will automatically filter down the visual and give me just the representation of that data. So as I click things over here on the left, it'll interact with the charts. And I believe with the Charticulator visual here, if I click on elements inside the chart, it'll actually highlight those items and then filter back to the rest of the page. So it acts more like a full custom visual where I'm able to interact between the visual and back and forth to the main part of the page. Now, Eric, I know I'm not exactly sure about your whole timing on things, but I think we're right about an hour now.
Yeah.
I'll do a quick time check and ask for questions. How late do we go, Eric? Because I have like oodles of content. We can keep going if we want to. If we can.
I think I have scheduled the meeting for half an hour more. So
okay.
If you want to use 25 minutes, that's fine. Then we can wrap up with the questions at the end.
Yeah, it's fine. No worries.
Yeah.
Let's keep going. So this was just like the general demo of building like a single visual. So now let's look at like not just this visual. Let's just actually build some intentional visuals. So let's go through and look through. We'll do the same thing again. We're going to go look at some data. We're going to go build a visual, and then we'll represent it. And there's a couple techniques that I want to point out here that are very relevant when you're building things with Charticulator. So walking through here, this is a generic. So on the right-hand side, this one here I've highlighted on the right, this is a standard Power BI visual. This is what you get kind of out of the box. You get a bars and numbers, and you adjust this with a bunch of various properties. But this is where we start leaving the realm of out-of-the-box visuals, and this is where Charticulator can excel, is on the left-hand side. The left one's a same chart, different color formatting, obviously. But now I can actually remove the x-axis and add it as data points on the individual data bars. So this is why you want to learn to do Charticulator, because there's always these nuancy things or additional things you want to do. Charticulator gives you this ability to grab data elements and kind of just stick them together. So you can learn how to do other visuals like this. And again, my YouTube series goes through all of these, and we walk through 10 episodes of just very specific custom visuals that you can build and how to build these amazing, cool custom visuals. So I'm going to move up the chain here and show you some other visuals you can build. This is what we talked about earlier by using some of the spiral chart. Oh, Eric, thank you for the link to the YouTube channel. This is another spiral one. So imagine in this chart you have over here on the left-hand side, imagine you have data by day. So we have dates, and then we have colors by product. So if you imagine with me an annular chart where you say how many days are in a year, you can actually look at growth of something over time by colors, and you can kind of spiral that out. This is more of like a fun visual, I think, just fun to play with, but not really relevant from providing a lot of data and action at this point. So I'm going to kind of skip this one. Just wanted to talk about the features and using that spiral, angular, or the polar plot to show you how to build a polar plot. Now, this is where I think it starts getting practical. So in this case, we actually have some, this is more like a barbell chart, or showing you the minimum and maximum and then the average here. So this is the ability for us to be able to calculate things inside our data points. So if we look at this chart, I have a product, a min, a max, an average, and a row count. So number of rows per item. So if I look at this, these are data points that are coming from Power BI Desktop. So over here on the left-hand side, I have the same thing that we were looking at earlier. We have built a table of products, sales units, and then units sold. But what we can do here is within each of these sale price or number or total sales price and then total units sold, you can actually break them down and do averaging, mining, max of different values here. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and rebuild this chart, basically like a bit of a barbell chart, where the blue dot represents the minimum value, the red dot would represent the average, and then the blue dot would represent the max by category. So this is where I think things get really interesting. There's really no visual that does this, or you can build this. You have to go to get your own custom visual or build a totally custom visual from scratch. So let's go explore some data first, and we'll build this one from scratch. So these are population numbers by country. So let's just take a quick look at the data here. So if I go over to the data tables and we'll go to this data set, you'll see here that I don't have multiple data points. Let's not use this one. Let's use global trade. Looks pretty good. We have countries. We have import export, but that's probably not going to help us because we need like multiple records. Variable 1, variable 2. Looking for a better data set that I have in here. I have the financials one, and maybe the financials one's the best one we should go for. We'll try this one. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for a dimension like product or units sold, right? So let's try units sold because it looks like that has a good varying number of numbers in there. So we'll go product by units sold. That'll work. Let's try that one. So I'm gonna go back to the report page. So we're gonna go over to our financials data. We're first gonna grab our product on the page. So we've got our 7 different products. And now we will grab our units sold. That'll be our number that we're gonna use here. Now, by default, it's gonna do a sum of units sold. So it's doing the sum of that value. So we don't really wanna do that. We want the min, max, and average first. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna modify this implicit measure and make it minimum. So the minimum value we find here is these 200 levels. So 249, 14, 200, that's our minimum values. Then what I'll do is I'll add units sold again, and this time we'll have it calculate the maximum. So click the implicit measures calculation, change it to maximum, and there's my maximum values. So we have a range now of my min and max, but now we need a data point that kind of sits in the middle here. So how do we get that value? We'll actually grab the units sold again for a third time. We'll add that as well, and now we'll just do the average. Now, this is all going to look fairly close in size, I believe, because these numbers are really close here. So maybe there's a way we can get a little bit more variance on this. So let's filter this visual by, I'm going to open the filter pane up here. Let's see if we can filter it by, be a good dimension here to filter by.
Country, perhaps. Yeah.
We'll give that a whirl. Okay, it looks like it's changing a little bit. So I think I'm okay with that. I think that'll make sense. All right, let's go with it. All right, so we'll put that together. This will be our starting point. So like what I always like to do, build the table first, because this is for each dimension that I see, this will likely be what we're going to see on the chart. So this is the product dimensions. There's 6 pieces here. We're going to see 6 pieces or 6 glyphs in Charticulator. So Control C, Control V. I'll bring my chart over here because that's what we're going to change it into. We'll move my data points over here to the left. Clicking on this new chart, let's close out the filters. Actually, you know what? I'm going to erase the filters first here. We'll get all the data initially. So erase that, close that out. We'll go into the visualizations panel, and then I will change it to the Charticulator app. And then you can see that it didn't quite make everything correct here. So I'm going to add all these units here, and I'm actually going to reorient them. So it's going to be min, average, and then max. So kind of in the sequential order that we need. We'll click on the ellipsis. We'll click edit again. We're going to now be in the editor of building our visual. Minimize the visualizations and fields. Click on the created chart. All right, and then so here's our created chart now. So we're going to start by, let's just start by building our line. So first thing we can do is click on this glyph, the plot segment. This is 2-dimensional, so we have the X and the Y. And right now it's going to stack by the X direction. So when I add a data point, and I'll just do it right now so you can see what it's looking like. I'll add a square to the glyphs. It's going up and down. That's not what we want. We actually want it horizontally because we're going to build horizontal bars. So we'll click on the plot segment, change it from stack on the X to stack on the Y, which then takes all the data bars across. Perfect. We'll probably want to add some level of labeling so we know which each of these data points are going to equal. So what I'll do is I'll bring the product item over here to the y-axis, which will then give us a name for each of the different dimensions. Now the bar is not really relevant now. I can just delete that. So I'm going to hit delete key to get rid of that. Now here comes the next part, which is a bit tricky. When we look at this, there's something I did not talk about yet so far. It's this concept of a data axis. This one icon here on the far right-hand side. This one will be your friend. So this helps you define multiple data points on a single scale that you can use to adjust things. So what I mean by that, if I click the data axis, I start here at the left because this is where 0 value will be. So the smallest value will be here. And I'll drag it to the right, and then that defines a line. So there's now this total line defines what data points we're going to be adding to that. So what I'm going to do now is add the min of units sold, and it'll put a average of min. So the idea here is Charticulator is always trying to aggregate things for us at some level. So if I have, there's actually grouping functions that are in here as well. So you can say average or min. It doesn't really matter because we are taking basically an average of a single data point. So there's really no weight to have it say average. It's just kind of telling you that whatever you're putting on this axis has to have some sort of aggregator to it. This is a little bit counterintuitive based on what you do in Power BI Desktop, because you're aggregating in desktop and then you're also aggregating again inside the Charticulator app as well. Just be aware of it, it's there. And then if I also can grab in the average of units sold, I'll also drag it to the line. And now you'll notice we have the two values. We now have our minimum of units sold and now our average, but they're both represented on the line as single data points. Now this is important because we're going to use those data points to help us define visual elements per glyph or per dimension. Lastly, I'll add the max of units sold to the data axis as well. And now I've got my 3 points. So now I have my min, my average, and my max. If I pop this in, you'll notice that there's a data axis on the page here as well. So I just want to point this out as well. If I click on different data elements down here, I don't have anything on the page yet. So you can actually click on the different glyphs on the page here, and it'll actually adjust this based on those glyphs. We don't have enough data points yet to show you that, but I'll show you that in a second when we get to it. All right, next thing. We wanted to draw the line, and then we need 3 circles on that line. So next what we're going to do is I'm going to clean this up just slightly. I don't like the position of the data axis. I'm going to say opposite. Oops, let's see if I can click the data axis here. Click the data axis and then say opposite, because I want the numbers on the opposite side of the data axis. So now that works. Then that's on the away from the middle lines. I can click the line value. I can start here at the first data point and go all the way to the end. So this is defining a range of a line that's going to go through all the different data points. Next, what I can do is if I want to change the color or thicken that up, I will maybe add a little bit of line thickness to that. Let's call it 3, maybe 4. So that's my thickness of the line. And now what I'll do is I'll add data points to that line that are going to define the average and the min and the max. So now what I can do is go to the marks. These are the shapes, and I'm going to add a shape here at the beginning. And then we can just make this 80. Let's go 100. Let's keep going. Let's go higher. Not big enough. That's probably good enough. Let's go 1, 6, 6. All right. So now we have a data point on one end. Now another thing where you can do, where you can add a little flare here, is if you want to add a stroke color to this, you can also add a stroke to this to make it act like it's got a little bit of an outside edge. So let's add that to 4 as well. So now I have like a little bit of looks like a dial on the end there. And then what we can do again is add another shape on the upper end. So then now I'm looking at the intersection of the max value, adding a data point there, 675 as well. We're going to add a stroke value that is a little bit gray. And then we're going to change the line width up to 4 again. And then finally, we're going to add our last data point on the average data point. So again, clicking the shapes, we'll go to the intersection of the average data point. And this time we're actually going to use maybe the average of units sold. Let's make it a dynamic value. So it'll change based on the size of the data point. And maybe for this one, we want to use like a red color to accent it a little bit more. And then the stroke of this one will match that, maybe like a lighter shade. Actually, let's go darker. Let's go darker with the color around the edge, and then we'll take the line thickness or width up to 4 as well. So now I have a min and a max, and you can do other stylistic things here too. If you want the mins to all meet the same level of coloring, you can then change all the mins to be like a cooler color. Let's go with this one, and then the stroke of that will be a darker color, a darker shade around the edge. And then on the other end, we can then go a different color. Let's go with maybe green. Go with a lighter color for the inside, and then we'll go for a darker color on the outside. So now I've got this kind of range looking thing here where the red is defining the center and everything else is adjusting. So if I click the pin in again, there's all my data ranges, and it looks like I accidentally moved the y-axis here. So let me just go here to plot segment, and then let me flip around my dimension properties. Let's go to the default area. And then you'll notice here on the data axis, I'm showing the data axis on the very first data point. You can actually say where you want it to be visible on. So because our data axis is on the bottom, we want the data axis showing on the very last data point. So we'll just change this from first to last. And then I think we also need to sort by, so the VVT is actually before Velo. So I think we also need to go here to the plot segment, and we should sort this by, order it by product. So it's not going to give you the default order. Instead, it will actually sort everything in alphabetical order. On the left-hand side, I'm going to increase my data axis up to, let's go 200. Too far, way too far. Let's go to 100, cut it in half. And there we go. So now we have our minimum values, our maximum values, and what our averages are looking like across a data line. You can then hit save, and then that will then produce, hopefully, back to report. I stretch this out, and there we go. So now we have the same representation of data from this graph now represented across here as well. So if we click on these different elements, we can then see how all of them are measuring and where the lines are adjusting as well. And they'll be relative. It will auto scale based on what you say. So as I click on this, it'll actually auto scale them together so you can see how all the data points fit together on a list. There's a lot more demos out there. You can build other things that are pretty cool. I built like a similar idea. This is like I call it like the TIE fighter plot, a minimum, maximum, and then a circle in the middle. So we go through that as well. We also have this other one here. This is actually a standard where you actually have goals. So we go through an example here of how to do, I think this is standardization in data reporting, is what you would look at this as. The bar represents the total height. And if you have a goal, the goal is represented by the end of the line here. So you can actually have the East region making 75 million, which was 25 million or 50% above your goal, as well as these other South and West regions where the full data bar is actually below the expected goal here at the end. So you can do all kinds of other crazy cool stuff, conditional formatting based on colors and whether it's positive or negative, all kinds of other really rich things. We cover all of these things inside the YouTube video series as well. And if you really want to get fancy, you can actually build this. So this is also built here in desktop. This is episode 8 that we go through. We actually go through and identify how you can build the chords or linking chords. And what this is representing is this is shipping data. So it's saying which countries ship things to and from various countries. And you can see here, China has a big export. It's very large, meaning they have lots of exports. And there's a lot of really thick ribbons of where they're exporting to. So China has a very thick ribbon over to Australia. The United States has a very large shipping ribbon over to, looks like, Canada and Mexico. A lot of shipping happening there and a lot of shipping happening between that and China as well. So anyways, you can also build this chart. It's also on the YouTube series as well. And with that, I think I've covered it all. Well, at least
So
a good starting point.
Yeah. Could you post a link to your YouTube series?
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah.
Want to find me on YouTube? I do a lot of podcasting and things as well. Everyone's doing a podcast these days. So I know, Eric, I believe you've got a podcast as well, correct?
Nope.
Oh, I thought you had one. Maybe I was thinking somebody else.
I only have a blog.
Not for now, right? We'll
for
get
now.
You. So you can find us on Power BI Tips. So if you go to YouTube, click on Power BI Tips, that's our channel. the playlist that we're looking for here is we have a whole playlist right around, let's go over here to season 1 Charticulator. And in here we have just a ton of videos. I go through a bunch of videos here. We have just a random season playlist as well. So let me grab that. I'll put that in the chat window. So that's one of them. And if you want to go learn more about Charticulator in general, we have another general playlist of all the videos that I have found on the internet around Charticulator. So let's see if I can find that one. I should have one, charts.powerbi tips. This is where I found, oops, I don't want to play it. I just want to show you it. Let's just view the playlist. So not only have I done the Charticulator series through Power BI Tips, I actually have a dedicated webpage of the early version of Charticulator. It's actually at chart.powerbi.tips. And I was so in love with the program when it came out initially, I actually made my own version of it. Charts with an S, I believe. Charts.powerbi.tips. And then this is an early version of Charticulator built on the Power BI Tips website. So I just love this tool. I think it's so cool. And this really fills a gap for the users who need highly customized visuals. And you can add them into your reports kind of all over the place. There's a lot of contributors to this this list of videos as well.
Great. Ashraf put a question in whether he could pin his created charts in PBI and reuse them in other reports. And
oh, great question.
Ilfat said that you could export it as a template and import it in another report.
Inside the web app, you could do this a little bit easier. I know they've been working on development of this. The Charticulator app, I would say a little bit in preview. There's a couple of features that are not quite there yet. So if I edit this visual, you'll see there's a little icon in the upper right-hand corner. Import and export are what those mean. Not very well labeled. You can export a template there. So that's where you would export a template. But right now, they are not using this in desktop. So they're actually working on how they would export things from this visual to be able to be used. So if you're in desktop, it's much harder to reuse these visuals back and forth. However, I would say this. The visual is represented here as a full visual. So if your data fields are the same and you want to reuse this visual in multiple locations, technically, and I haven't tested this fully, but you should be able to go directly to the visual, and you should be able to grab it, Control-C for copy, and you should be able to go to either a different report or another page in the report and Control-V that data. So all of the properties, all the fields, how you configured it, all of those configurations stay with that Control-C, Control-V action, and you should be able to drop this between different reports, assuming you have the data of the same in both locations.
Great.
Any other questions? Cool.
Not yet.
Everyone's brains are just melting out their ears because that's when I saw this for the first time. That's kind of how I felt. It just kind of was like my brain just oozed out of my ear. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy and so cool and very neat. But man, there was a lot you have to learn here. The learning curve is quite steep in Charticulator because you'll want to build something and do something cool with it, but you're in your mind, you have this great visual drawn out and you can't quite make it work. So there's definitely this idea of like the glyphs and aggregating things. Again, I explain all these things in detail as I go through the 10-part series on YouTube. I recommend, a lot of people have found value in, a lot of people have found value in just going through the video, pausing it, getting up to speed with what's going on there, and then working on the visuals themselves. Because I do a step-by-step walkthrough for all the different things.
Yeah, I think that Daniel Parrish said it's something like it stacks for visuals.
It is.
Understanding
like
the glyphs
yes.
and segments, etc. And
you ask if drill through will work. I believe the drill through will work if you set up the visual to allow it. So if I hit edit on the visual, I believe it's contained on a field by field basis, I think. So let me just double check here. So let me just minimize these things for this chart. There are additional tooltips, context menus, and selections. These are things that you can turn on by shape by shape. So when you talk about like the glyphs, I actually highlighted various elements here. So if I highlight the glyph itself, you can actually have tooltips for the single glyph that would show up when it recognizes there's data points for it. And so that means you can actually have different tooltips if you're hovering the colored green bar versus tooltips at the gray bar level. So you can actually get really nuanced with a lot of these things that are happening inside how this would look. So anyways, I don't think drill through based on this interactivity menu, I don't think drill through today is supported. But let me just double check here. I'm going to go to a different page here. Let's see, we're on this page for east, west, south. I'm going to just double check it here. Click on the visual. We're in the data from Jeff Weird. I'm going to grab a region. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go find this visual wherever I put it. This one. Okay, so I'm going to add a region to the drill through here. Go back to my other visual here and right click. It looks like it works. So it's still detecting the dimensions for you and still allowing you to have drill through that goes through the data point. So yes, drill through does work on the visual. I'm going to let you navigate through to a different page, which I would expect us to show one value, and it does. So it does work. Great question. Oh, you might be on mute, Eric.
Yeah, thanks. The standard phrase these days. You are on mute.
You are on mute.
Yeah, thank you so much for presenting, Mike. It was again a great pleasure, and I hope that all attendees has learned a lot and are interested in trying the Charticulator out. It's really fun, and you can make some awesome stuff about it. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
Please
no problem.
please also fill out the evaluation form so Mike can get some feedback on his session, and also if you have comments or idea for future sessions as well, you can submit that as well.
And I'll be happy to meet everyone when we all join together and on our conference in person. So I'll be looking forward to that.
Me too. So thank you very much, Mike,
Thank you.
and have a great day.
Awesome. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joost.
Bye.
Bye.